Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are very pleased to share with you different stories about love and betrayal from around the world. So now, let's begin our journey through today's story. Baker stood on the balcony, fingers tightly gripping the edge of his whiskey glass, staring at Houston's brightly lit night skyline. The October breeze brushed against his cheeks, but couldn't take away the boiling anger and humiliation deep inside him. 30 minutes ago, his wife had publicly humiliated him in front of their mutual friends, in front of at least 20 people. "My husband can't even satisfy my most basic needs," Elaine laughed in front of everyone, fingers flirtatiously twirling her carefully dyed golden brown hair. The room instantly fell silent. The awkward atmosphere almost solidified, then erupted into unnatural laughter. All eyes turned to him. Some people even snickered without hiding it, with curiosity and speculation in their eyes. In that moment, Baker felt an icy calmness sweep over him. This calmness wasn't resignation, but something more dangerous, a cold, calculated anger. He looked around at the complex expressions on his friends' faces: sympathy, embarrassment, curiosity, and an undisguised desire for gossip. 15 years of marriage, publicly flogged before everyone. He didn't defend himself, didn't angrily strike back, and certainly didn't leave in embarrassment. Baker simply calmly finished his drink, his gaze sweeping across everyone's face, then nodded to the group. "I think I should head back first. I have an early meeting tomorrow." His voice was surprisingly steady, even surprising himself. He took his coat from the rack, not looking back at Elaine, not even saying goodbye to her. As he walked toward the parking lot, it felt like each step was on a knife's edge. The night air suddenly turned biting. But this coldness was nothing compared to the frost spreading in his heart. Driving through the city lights, Baker's thoughts drifted back 15 years. He and Elaine had met at a University of Texas alumni event. At that time, he was a young geological engineer who had just found a job at a Houston oil company, while she was an ambitious real estate student, beautiful, confident, and full of energy. They accidentally met 3 times at the same campus coffee shop. The first time, he noticed she was holding a real estate magazine, but didn't have the courage to approach her. The second time, they smiled at each other, but remained strangers. The third time, Baker finally gathered the courage to walk to her table and ask if he could join her. "Do you always look this composed?" Elaine asked then, her eyes sparkling with mischievous light, fingers casually tracing the rim of her cup. "Only when I know what I'm doing," Baker replied, which made her laugh, her face showing a vivid expression he would later come to love deeply. After 3 months of passionate romance, they decided to move in together. A year later, during a geological survey trip to West Texas, Baker proposed to her under a sky full of stars. Elaine accepted with surprise and delight, her eyes sparkling with light that matched the starry sky above. Their relationship was complementary in many ways. Baker liked Elaine's vivacity and social skills. She could always fill any gathering with laughter, while Elaine appreciated his stability and reliability, his rational thinking and problem-solving abilities. After getting married, they moved into a comfortable house in West Houston, and both of their careers flourished. Baker gradually rose in the oil company's geological team, while Elaine became a successful real estate agent, showing a keen business sense in a bull market. After 5 years of married life, their daughter Naomi was born, bringing new joy and challenges to their family. Baker remembered the first time he held that tiny life, the surge of protectiveness and responsibility he felt in his heart. Elaine was also a loving mother, although she quickly returned to work. They hired a nanny to help care for Naomi, but both made every effort to spend time with their daughter as she grew up. Life seemed perfect, at least on the surface. Family dinners, weekend outings, annual vacations. All these made up the canvas of their lives. But as time passed, tiny cracks began to appear. Baker parked his car in the driveway in front of their house, but didn't immediately get out. He sat there, looking through the windshield at the home they had built together, thinking about the changes in Elaine over the past 2 years. At first, the changes were so subtle he barely noticed. She began to pay more attention to her appearance, buying more expensive clothes, frequently visiting high-end beauty salons. Her social circle expanded, her working hours extended, and they spent less and less time together. He had tried to ask, but she always attributed it to work pressure or a midlife crisis. I'm still growing, Baker. I don't want to be defined as just someone's wife or mother, she said during an argument a few months ago, with something in her eyes he couldn't fully understand. He had believed her, respected her independence and career ambition. Baker was never the type of man who expected his wife to be a full-time housewife. In fact, he admired Elaine's ambition and achievements. They shared household chores and parenting responsibilities, establishing a relatively equal partnership. Although Baker's work sometimes required him to travel for a few days, even when away, he would always make sure to call Naomi, help her with homework, or just listen to her tell about her day at school. He would regularly text Elaine, asking about her work, sharing his experiences. He believed this was the way to keep their marriage vibrant. However, in recent months, some details began to catch his attention. They were like tiny faults in a geological layer, appearing smooth on the surface, but a professional knew they predicted deeper movements. Elaine's phone suddenly had a new password. When he happened to need to use her phone, she became unusually nervous. "I have sensitive client information," she explained, but her eyes didn't meet his. She began to take certain calls in another room, deliberately lowering her voice. Her weekend, work meetings became more frequent and always scheduled when he was taking Naomi to her soccer games. Once, when he came home early, he found Elaine just out of the shower, even though that day she claimed to be only doing paperwork at the office. She explained that the gym showers were broken, but Baker later called to confirm, and the gym facilities were working fine that day. At first, Baker tried to convince himself he was just being paranoid. Maybe this was the normal evolution of a long-term marriage. Perhaps everyone needed some personal space. But as a geological engineer who needed to observe small details in his work, his intuition told him something was wrong. Just as small changes in underground structure might indicate huge oil deposits, these subtle changes in their marriage might hide deeper problems. 3 weeks ago, when Elaine said she was going to Austin for a 2-day real estate conference, Baker found a receipt from a luxury hotel in downtown Houston in her suit pocket while sorting laundry. This itself wasn't strange, as real estate agents often met clients in upscale places. But the date on the receipt was the day before she claimed to attend the conference. And when he checked her credit card statement, he discovered spending in Houston during the conference, period, not in Austin. This discovery triggered his professional instincts cultivated over years. As an expert in analyzing underground rock layers and structures, Baker began systematically collecting information. He didn't directly confront her, because he knew without concrete evidence, she would deny everything and only become more careful. Instead, he began to notice more details: names she mentioned, patterns of her work hours, and places she claimed to have been. He recorded this information, looking for patterns and inconsistencies, just as he analyzed geological data in his work. Under his workbench in the garage, he installed a small camera, recording when she left and returned home. He checked their joint credit card statements, discovering suspicious lunch expenses, amounts too large for one person. Once, there was even a charge from a high-end men's clothing store, and Baker never received any gift. Most disturbing was that he noticed a clear downturn in Elaine's work performance evaluations. As a real estate agent, her transaction volume had always been steady, but in recent months, her sales data began to decline. This contradicted her claim of being busier with work. One evening, while Elaine was in the shower, Baker checked her phone. The password had been changed, but he noticed she had forgotten to delete Baker's fingerprint unlock information, and he successfully unlocked the phone. Although there was no clear textual evidence, she was obviously careful enough. One contact caught his attention: Keller. The name seemed familiar. Baker remembered Elaine had mentioned this person as an important client, an entrepreneur investing in real estate. But the contact's existence itself wasn't suspicious. What really raised alarms was that in Elaine's calendar, there were many meetings scheduled with Keller, some of which coincided exactly with the seminars or open houses she claimed to be attending. More suspicious was that in her photo gallery, there were several pictures of new houses supposedly taken for clients. But in the background, the blurry figure of the same man could be seen. Baker enlarged these photos, and although not clear enough, he could recognize that this person was Keller, a tall, robust man, about 45 years old, always wearing custom suits, who appeared in the promotional materials on Elaine's company website. With these scattered but growing pieces of evidence, Baker began to investigate Keller. Through social media and public records, he learned that Keller was a successful real estate investor, married with 2 children. His wife Lauren was a pediatrician, and they seemed to have a perfect family. But Baker also discovered rumors that Keller had had affairs, though without concrete evidence. A week ago, Baker decided to take more direct action. He took a day off and followed Elaine from a distance. That day, she claimed to have several open houses, but Baker saw her enter a high-end hotel at noon. An hour later, Keller also entered the same hotel. They left separately 2 hours later, about 10 minutes apart. Baker took photos of them entering and leaving the hotel, feeling a knot in his stomach. Nevertheless, he remained calm and continued collecting evidence. He wanted the complete picture, wanted to understand the full scope and depth of this affair. However, it wasn't until tonight, at their friend Wright's party, that all the pieces finally came together. Just before Elaine publicly humiliated him, Baker accidentally overheard her conversation with Keller in the kitchen. He had gone to get a drink, but hearing Elaine's laughter made him stop at the doorway. He'll never know. Elaine's voice carried a flippancy he had never heard before. He's too focused on his rocks and charts to notice anything between us. Are you sure? Keller's voice sounded worried. He doesn't seem like a fool, Elaine. Last time I ran into him at the mall, his look made me very uncomfortable. Trust me, he hasn't noticed anything unusual. I've been deceiving him for 6 months, Elaine said, followed by a light laugh. Besides, even if he found out, what then? He loves me and Naomi too much to risk losing us. If you're so certain. Keller's voice sounded less convinced. But I still think we should be more careful. Your husband seems like the quiet but dangerous type. Oh, come on, Elaine said dismissively. Baker? Dangerous? He's a geologist, not a spy. His most dangerous behavior is being so focused on National Geographic magazine that he forgets to eat dinner. Their laughter stabbed like knives into Baker's heart. He quietly retreated to the living room, feeling as if he had fallen into an ice pit. Not just the betrayal itself, but Elaine's contempt and mockery toward him stirred an unprecedented anger in him. It was at that moment, as he stood in the crowded living room, watching their friends enjoying the party, that Baker decided on his course of action. Not out of impulse, but a cold, deliberate decision. He had evidence, he had time, and now he was meticulously planning his response. When Elaine humiliated him in front of everyone, it only confirmed his resolve. Baker got out of the car, breathing deeply in the night air. Distant thunder heralded an approaching storm, which seemed a perfect reflection of his inner state. He walked into their home, the house silent. Naomi was spending the night at a friend's house, attending a weekend girls' gathering, and Elaine was probably still at the party, enjoying the aftermath of her public humiliation of her husband. Baker went directly to his home office, his sanctuary, filled with geological maps, rock samples, and professional books. Behind the bookshelf, on the wall, was a hidden safe. Only he knew the password. He entered the numbers, Naomi's birthday, opened the safe, and took out a thick folder. It contained all the evidence he had collected over the past few weeks: photos, receipts, credit card statements, surveillance camera footage, and his investigation notes. He spread these materials on his desk, organizing them by category, just like preparing an important geological report. Each photo, each receipt, each record was evidence of his broken marriage. Next, Baker turned on his computer and began drafting a series of emails. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, his thoughts clear, his purpose defined. First was an email to his lawyer Fletcher, detailing his marital situation and his desire to initiate divorce proceedings, attaching copies of all the evidence. Then an email to Elaine's boss Winters, detailing how she had used company resources to cover up her affair, including false business trip reports and private appointments during work hours. As a reputable real estate firm, they wouldn't want to be associated with such behavior. Finally, an email to Keller's wife Lauren, attaching all the evidence involving Keller. As a respected pediatrician, Lauren knew nothing of her husband's betrayal and had a right to know the truth. But Baker didn't stop there. As a professional skilled in data, he knew information was power, and timing was everything. He logged into their joint investment accounts and transferred funds from his personal contributions to a newly opened individual account. This was completely legal, as these funds could be clearly traced to his personal income. He didn't touch joint property or Elaine's personal contribution portion, which was important for future legal proceedings. Next, he visited the website of the real estate company where Elaine worked, downloading all her client reviews and sales performance records. He noticed that her performance had indeed declined in recent months, which might be useful in future property division and alimony negotiations. Finally, Baker opened a new document and began drafting preliminary terms for the divorce agreement. As a rational person, he wanted this process to be as fair and efficient as possible, but also to ensure his and Naomi's interests were protected. He particularly noted custody arrangements. Considering Naomi was already 16, her opinion would be valued in court. When the midnight bells rang, Baker heard the front door open and close, the crisp sound of high heels on the hardwood floor. He quickly organized the documents, put them in an elegant folder, then turned off his computer. Then he waited quietly, like a hunter waiting for prey to enter the trap. When Elaine entered the bedroom, Baker was already pretending to be asleep. He heard her removing makeup, showering, then the slight rustle of clothing. When she finally crawled into bed, he could smell a strange mixture of scents on her: perfume, alcohol, and a cologne he wasn't familiar with. He maintained even breathing, but with his eyes slightly open, observing her. Elaine looked tired but satisfied, with a glow on her face he hadn't seen in a long time. She glanced at him, seemingly confirming he was indeed asleep, then turned away, her back to him, and quickly fell asleep. Once Elaine's breathing became deep and regular, confirming she was truly asleep, Baker gently rose, taking the prepared folder from his bedside drawer. He placed it on her nightstand, ensuring it would be the first thing she saw when waking in the morning. On the cover, in his neat handwriting, was a simple sentence: "I know everything." Then he went to the guest room, closed the door, and lay in bed looking at the ceiling. He knew a storm was coming, but at this moment, after taking action, he felt a strange calm. Whatever happened tomorrow, at least the truth was finally out in the open. In the darkness of the guest room, Baker contemplated his marriage, his future, and how he would rebuild his life after this betrayal. He wasn't sure what awaited him, but he knew one thing: he would never again allow anyone, whether Elaine or anyone else, to disrespect and humiliate him so. As raindrops began to hit the window, Baker finally closed his eyes, letting exhaustion carry him into a dreamless sleep. Tomorrow would be a decisive day, and he needed all his strength to face it. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains into the guest room, the air fresh and cold after the rain. Baker was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, hands crossed on his knees, waiting for the inevitable storm. He was dressed neatly, as if preparing for an important meeting, wearing a dark blue shirt and dark gray pants, the outfit he usually wore on days of important decisions. He checked his phone, confirming all pre-prepared emails were set up, ready to be sent with a single command. Then he waited quietly, listening for sounds from the master bedroom. As expected, around 7:30, a sharp gasp broke the morning stillness, followed by the sound of papers being moved. The script was unfolding exactly as he had anticipated. After a few minutes, he heard Elaine's bare feet running down the hallway, then urgent knocking on the door. "Baker!" Elaine's voice trembled, with a fear and desperation he had never heard before. "Baker, we need to talk. Right now." He didn't immediately respond, letting silence itself be an answer. The door was pushed open forcefully, and Elaine stood there, pale as paper, tightly clutching the folder. She was still in her nightclothes, hair disheveled, eyes swollen, evidently having cried. She looked 10 years older than her actual age, all confidence and grace gone, leaving only fear and insecurity. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper, raising the folder. "These photos, these receipts, you've been following me?" Baker slowly stood up, facing his wife. He maintained a calm expression, but in his eyes flashed a dangerous light. "I think the documents explain everything, Elaine. No need for me to explain, right? You've been tracking me? Spying on me?" Her voice shifted from shock to anger, as if she were the victim. "This is an invasion of privacy." "No, Elaine." Baker's voice was deep and firm. "I just noticed things you hoped I wouldn't notice. As a professional who observes small details, I'm good at that." Her eyes again scanned the contents of the file, photos showing her and Keller at various locations, including the hotel where she supposedly attended a conference. receipts and schedules proving her lies. Most devastating was a series of surveillance images recording intimate interactions between her and Keller. These don't prove anything, she argued weakly, but her tone had already lost confidence. Really? Baker raised an eyebrow. Then perhaps Winters and Lauren will have a different opinion. Elaine's face turned even paler. What do you mean? I have emails prepared, with all this evidence attached. One to your boss, detailing how you used company resources and time for an extramarital affair. Another to Keller's wife, letting her know the true nature of her husband, Baker said calmly, as if discussing the weather. Just one button press, Elaine. You can't do that, she said quietly, her voice filled with fear. You would ruin everything. My career, Keller's marriage. Just like you ruined our marriage when you humiliated me in front of all our friends last night. Baker's voice suddenly took on an edge. Like when you mocked me with Keller in the kitchen, saying I was too focused on rocks and charts to notice what was happening between you two. Elaine looked at him shocked, realizing he knew much more than she had imagined. You heard. Yes, I heard everything, including your mockery of me and your contempt for our marriage. Elaine suddenly fell to her knees, tears rolling down her cheeks. This was a dramatic gesture, but Baker doubted its sincerity. I'm sorry, Baker. I don't know what I was thinking. It was just a stupid mistake. What I said last night was a joke. I'd had too much to drink and said foolish things. No, it wasn't a joke, nor a momentary mistake. Baker walked to the window, gazing at the garden after the rain. It was the final judgment on our 15 years of marriage. It was the expression of your true thoughts. He turned to her, his eyes cold. By the way, I've already transferred the investment funds from my personal contribution. Within the legal framework, of course. I believe you'll find our joint account has a lot less money. Elaine raised her head in surprise, fear mixed with anger. What? You can't do that. That's our joint property. Actually, I can. All transfers have clear records of fund sources, proving it's my personal income. My lawyer Fletcher has already prepared the relevant documents. You can consult your own lawyer, but I think you'll find everything is legal. Baker's voice was cold and resolute. Is this how it's going to be now? You're going to punish me with money. Elaine stood up, trying to regain some dignity. No, I'm just protecting my interests. Just as you've been doing. Baker walked to the desk and took another folder. This is the first draft of the divorce agreement. My terms are simple. Primary custody of Naomi goes to me. You get reasonable visitation rights. I keep the house. You get 40% of our joint savings. All these terms are fair and comply with Texas law. You can't just end everything like this, Elaine pleaded. We have 15 years of marriage, a child. We can fix this, Baker. For Naomi's sake. She shouldn't suffer because of my mistake. Baker turned to face her, determination flashing in his eyes. Don't bring Naomi into this. Did you think of her when you were with Keller? Did you think of how it would affect her when you humiliated me at the party? Elaine lowered her head, speechless. One more thing. Baker took out his phone, showing a draft social media post that was already set up. This is the statement I'm planning to post in our mutual social circle. I've already sent it to a few close friends, including Wright and Taylor. Very professional, no specific details, but enough for everyone to know the truth. Baker looked at the phone screen, reading softly. After careful consideration, Elaine and I have decided to end our marriage. This decision stems from Elaine choosing to seek fulfillment outside our relationship. Please respect our privacy, especially for our daughter Naomi. Simple, direct, completely truthful. You wouldn't. Elaine shook her head, but her voice lacked confidence. You're not that kind of person. You've always valued privacy, cared about social image. Are you sure? Baker countered, his voice calm but icy. 6 months ago, I also didn't think you were the type to have an affair. People change after being betrayed, Elaine. You no longer know the man I am now, just as I evidently never truly knew you. Elaine stared at him, realizing for the first time how different the man before her was from the one she thought she knew. Baker had always been gentle, rational, predictable, but now she saw a cold, calculating, determined stranger. This transformation frightened her. What do you want? She finally asked, defeat in her voice. I want you to decide within 48 hours whether to accept the divorce agreement. If you sign, this evidence won't be made public. You can maintain some dignity, can tell friends we separated amicably. Naomi doesn't need to know the whole truth. Baker's voice was cold and businesslike. If you refuse, then I will send those emails without hesitation. Post that social media statement. The choice is yours. You're blackmailing me. Elaine stood up, disbelief in her voice. No, I'm giving you choices. Far more than you gave me. His tone showed no trace of compromise. I could have sent this evidence directly, but I chose to give you a chance to maintain some decency. Not for you, but for Naomi. Just then, the sound of the front door opening caught their attention. A familiar voice came from downstairs. Dad? Mom? I'm back. Naomi's voice sounded excited and vibrant, in stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere in the room. Elaine quickly wiped away her tears, struggling to fix her appearance, trying to regain some composure. Baker took a deep breath, preparing to face their daughter, who was the ultimate reason for all his actions, to protect Naomi from the full impact of her parents' marriage collapse. We'll talk later, he said quietly to Elaine. Now, for Naomi's sake, stay calm. Naomi ran up the stairs, her footsteps full of energy. When she entered the hallway, seeing her parents both standing at the guest room door, she immediately sensed the tension in the air. She was a perceptive girl, always able to feel subtle changes in emotions. What's going on? She asked, her eyes moving between her parents, noticing her father's unusually serious expression and her mother's swollen eyes. Is everything okay? Baker and Elaine exchanged a glance. This was a moment they had to face together as parents, regardless of the state of their marriage. Sweetheart, Baker said softly, walking toward Naomi. We need to talk to you. Some things have changed. He guided his daughter to the living room, with Elaine following, maintaining a certain distance. The three sat down, and Baker began this difficult conversation as gently but directly as possible. Naomi, your mother and I have decided to separate for a while. He chose his words carefully, wanting to protect his daughter but not lie to her. We have some issues we need to resolve. Naomi's eyes immediately filled with tears, but she maintained her composure. Is it because you don't love each other anymore? This simple but direct question plunged the room into brief silence. Baker looked at Elaine, waiting for her response. Things are more complicated than that, honey, Elaine finally said, her voice trembling. Sometimes adults make wrong decisions that cause irreparable damage. Mom had an affair, didn't she? Naomi suddenly asked, with a calmness beyond her years. Baker and Elaine looked at her surprised. How did you know? Baker asked. I'm not a child anymore, Dad, Naomi said, her eyes moist but voice firm. I saw Mom with Mr. Keller at the mall. They didn't look like they were discussing business. And Mom's recent behavior changes, always coming home late, and those secret calls. She turned to Elaine, disappointment in her eyes. Why, Mom? You knew this would hurt Dad and me. Elaine couldn't look her daughter in the eyes, shame and regret finally seeming real. I made a mistake, sweetie. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. No, Naomi shook her head, her voice firm. A mistake is an accident. You did this for 6 months. I heard you talking to someone on the phone. That was a choice. Every day you chose to betray our family. Her words stabbed like knives into Elaine's heart. Baker felt a mix of conflicting emotions, pride in his daughter's maturity and insight, but also sadness that she was forced to face the complexities of the adult world too soon. Things have gotten messy, and I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of it, Baker told Naomi. But you need to know that, no matter what, we both love you. That will never change. So what happens now? Naomi asked, wiping away tears. Are we moving? Yes, at least temporarily, Baker explained. I've rented an apartment, not far from here, still in your school district. You can choose to live with me, or with your mother, or we can arrange for you to spend time at both places. It's completely up to what you want. I want to live with you, Dad, Naomi said without hesitation, then looked at Elaine. At least for now. I need time to think, Mom. Elaine nodded, tears silently falling. I understand, honey. I'll respect whatever decision you make. The following days were a difficult period of adjustment for everyone. Baker and Naomi moved into a comfortable apartment in West Houston, just a 15-minute drive from their original home. Baker took a week off work to help Naomi adjust to the new environment and ensure her school life wasn't affected. Elaine tried to salvage things through frequent calls and texts, but Baker maintained a cool distance, communicating with her only about matters concerning Naomi. Whenever she tried to discuss their relationship or seek reconciliation, He would politely but firmly change the subject or end the conversation. "You can't hate me forever, Baker," Elaine suddenly said during a call about Naomi's weekend arrangements. "We have too much history, too many shared memories." "I don't hate you, Elaine," Baker calmly replied. "That would require emotional investment, and I don't have any emotions left for you. I only feel disappointment and indifference toward you." This indifference was harder for Elaine to accept than anger. Anger at least meant caring, while indifference meant complete abandonment. The night before the 48-hour deadline arrived, Elaine came to Baker's apartment. She looked haggard, obviously not having slept well for days. Fortunately, Naomi was at soccer practice and not home. "I've signed it," she said, handing him a folder. "All the conditions you proposed. I only have one request. Please don't limit my time with Naomi, even if the legal documents give you that right." Baker checked the documents, confirming everything was in order, with her signature on all pages. "As long as Naomi wants to see you, I won't interfere. But that's up to her, not me." Elaine nodded, tears welling up that she was trying to hold back. "Keller and I are over. Not because of your threats, but because I realized what I had lost." Baker looked at her expressionlessly. "That means nothing to me. You didn't just betray our marriage, Elaine. You betrayed my trust in you, the family we built, and the values we shared. Once these things are broken, they cannot be repaired." "I know you hate me now," Elaine said softly. "But do you think one day, maybe we could at least be friends? For Naomi's sake?" "No." Baker's answer was brief and definitive. "We can be civil co-parents, but we will never be friends again. Some betrayals are too deep to be forgiven or forgotten." As the divorce proceedings progressed, Baker kept his promise not to make the evidence public. But he also didn't help Elaine maintain her social image. When friends asked about the reasons for the divorce, he neither lied nor explained in detail, simply saying, "Ask Elaine. It's her story to tell." This response itself conveyed enough information, leading many friends to distance themselves from Elaine. And when someone tried to find out more details, Baker would only say, "I don't think discussing my ex-wife's behavior benefits anyone. I'm only concerned with creating a stable environment for Naomi." This calmness and restraint rather convinced people that Elaine must have done something unforgivable. Rumors soon spread in their social circle, and though without specific details, everyone suspected that infidelity had caused the end of this seemingly perfect marriage. A month later, when Baker was collecting some of Naomi's belongings left at the old house, he discovered Elaine had moved out. She had sold her share of the property and moved to an apartment on the other side of the city. Evidently, the pressure of facing the truth in the community was too great. More importantly, Baker heard from mutual friends that Elaine's career had also been affected. Although Winters didn't fire her, she was moved away from major clients, and her sales performance continued to decline. And Keller, it was said his wife Lauren had indeed received an anonymous email with photos of him and Elaine. They were currently going through a difficult divorce, with Lauren demanding control of most of their joint property. Baker didn't get the expected satisfaction from this news. The pleasure of revenge quickly faded, leaving only a hollow sense of victory. But he didn't regret his decision. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some boundaries once crossed can never be returned to. 6 months later, at an important soccer game of Naomi's, Baker noticed Elaine sitting in the stands across the field. She was alone, looking much older than before, no longer having that glow of confidence, replaced by a heavy fatigue. When Naomi scored a goal, she stood up and cheered, but her gaze constantly turned toward Baker, seeking some connection or acknowledgement. Baker didn't respond to her gaze, focusing on applauding for his daughter. After the game, Naomi ran to him, giving him a big hug. "Did you see my goal, Dad?" she asked excitedly, her face radiant with youth and vitality. "Of course I did," he answered with a smile, wiping the sweat from her forehead. "You were amazing. I'm so proud of you." As they walked toward the car, Baker saw Elaine standing alone, evidently waiting for an opportunity to briefly speak with Naomi. She looked both expectant and anxious, hands clutching her bag strap, eyes full of longing. "Do you want to talk to Mom?" he asked Naomi, respecting his daughter's choice. Naomi hesitated a moment, then nodded. "Just for a few minutes." Baker nodded in agreement, watching his daughter walk toward her mother. He saw Elaine embrace Naomi, and the two talked for a few minutes. Although he couldn't hear the content of the conversation, He could see the atmosphere was tense. Finally, Naomi ended the conversation and returned to his side. "Everything okay?" Baker asked, looking at his daughter with concern. "Yeah," Naomi answered simply. "Mom wanted to know if I could spend a day with her next weekend." I said yes. "If that's what you want, of course," Baker confirmed, respecting his daughter's right to establish a relationship with her mother, regardless of his personal feelings toward Elaine. As they walked to the car, Baker felt Elaine's gaze following them. He didn't look back, with no intention of reconciliation. Some boundaries, once broken, can never be restored. That night, as Baker sat alone on the balcony of his new home, he reflected on the night that changed everything. 6 months had passed, and what he felt was no longer anger or pain, but a quiet acceptance of reality. His marriage was over, but his life continued. He had his career, had his daughter whom he deeply loved, had a new direction in life. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Elaine. "Thank you for letting Naomi and me meet. I know you'll never forgive me, but I hope with time, we can at least be civil for her sake, and maybe someday we could." Baker deleted the message without finishing reading it. He didn't need Elaine's thanks, didn't need her hope, and certainly didn't need any hint of possible reconciliation. The only connection between them was Naomi, nothing more. He got up and went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of bourbon whiskey, and returned to the balcony. Tomorrow he would take Naomi to visit universities. She was already beginning to consider her future path. Life went on, and he chose to look forward, not dwell in past betrayal. As he pondered, his phone vibrated again. This time it was Fisher, his lawyer. "All in order. Divorce officially completed. Documents arriving tomorrow. Congratulations on your freedom." Baker looked at this message, a slight smile appearing on his lips. Freedom, it was an interesting word. He had never before viewed marriage as a constraint, but now, he did indeed feel a release. Not because the marriage itself had ended, but because the lies and betrayal had finally ended. In the Houston night, Baker realized that true power wasn't in revenge, but in deciding how to move forward. He chose not to be defined by betrayal, but would also never forget or forgive it. Some wounds are too deep, even time cannot fully heal them. But he would live with these scars, for himself and for Naomi. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a real ending. On the battlefield of love and betrayal, there are no true winners, only survivors. And Baker was determined to be a strong survivor, someone who refused to succumb to betrayal, a father who taught his daughter what dignity and self-respect meant. As the night deepened and the city lights twinkled in the distance, Baker finally felt the storm inside him subsiding. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, just moving forward. This is life, sometimes cruel, sometimes beautiful, but always worth facing honestly. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.